All right, so now that we have our note sharing settings page created, the next thing we're going to do is implement the list that should be on that page as well as the form for sharing a given note with new people. So here's what this is going to look like. We're going to create a new component. I'm just going to put the form and the list in the same component for now. We can always split it out later. Oops, in our components, there we go. We're going to call this something like shared emails.js. All right, we'll just call it something like that. And we're going to export our component now, which we'll again call shared emails. And this is going to need to take a few props from the parent component, because first of all, we're going to want it to be the parent component that actually passes in the emails that should be displayed in the list. And we're also going to want it to be the parent component that actually contains all of the functionality for sharing a note with someone else and for removing access if we want to. Okay, so we're going to have the emails as a prop, and additionally we're going to have two more props which are going to be functions that the parent component can listen for, and one is going to be on add, and we'll have another one called on delete. Now on add will be, of course, when we want to add a new email to our list, and on delete will be when we want to remove one. So here's what all of this is going to look like now. We're going to say return, and inside React fragments, we're going to say emails.map. And for each email address, we're just going to display it inside an item, probably like a div or something like that. We'll just say div. And for now, we'll just say h3 and display the person's email inside of there. Okay? So we'll come back and add some styling to this later on, of course. But the next thing we're going to do is add a form for adding new emails to a notes list of shared people. All right. So what that's going to look like, we're going to say input, and this input is going to have a value which will be equal to a state variable. So let's add the use state hook to this component up here at the top. We'll say import use state from React. And then inside our component, we're going to say const new email and set new email. This will be the value inside, set new email that should be. This will be the value inside that input, and it's going to start off, of course, as an empty string. And then down here, for the value of our input, it's going to be new email, and on change here will be equal to set new email. There we go, to e.target.value. Awesome. So that's our input, and for the placeholder, let's just add a placeholder here as well. For the placeholder, we'll say something like enter a new email to share with. Okay, so now that we have the input, we're going to add a button underneath that, and this button here is going to have the text share, and when the button is clicked, we're going to say on click. It will actually call this on add thing with the value inside our new email input. Okay, so we'll say on click, and we're going to say anonymous function on add, and pass the new email that we want to share with to the function. Okay, so that'll allow the parent component to take care of making a server request, that kind of stuff. All right, now as far as this on delete thing goes, we're going to need to import our X button component that we created a long time ago. And for that, we're going to say import X button from X button. And we're going to display that inside each of our emails. And what that's going to look like, we're just going to say X button. And when this thing is clicked, we're going to call on delete with the email on which that button was clicked. Okay, so that'll look like this. We'll have an anonymous function, and then we'll say on delete email. And that is our shared emails component. So let's display this thing inside our page. We're going to open up our note sharing settings page. There it is. And we're going to import our component we just created. We'll say import shared emails from components shared emails. And then down here, we're going to replace these two divs, and we're going to put shared emails in their place. Okay, so the emails for now, just to, give this a test run, because we haven't actually implemented any of this data stuff in our backend, right? We don't have any emails to actually share our notes with yet. We're just going to pass an array of fake emails here. So we'll say bob@gmail.com, betty@gmail.com, and I don't know, one more. We'll say barry@gmail.com. Cool. So we have our shared emails, and as far as the functions for adding and deleting shared emails, we'll get to those a little later on once we've actually implemented our server endpoints. So we should be good to go. Let's go take a look at what this thing is looking like so far. All right, everything is looking decent. We're going to need to do a little bit of styling tweaks here to make it look really good, but it does seem to be working so far. And if you want to test and just make sure that the on add and on delete things are hooked up correctly, we could always just add those props and have them do something, boring like display an alert. So we'll just say on add. We'll have this display an alert that says adding, and then we'll insert the email that we got passed up from that component. So we'll say, you know what, let's change this to backticks here. There we go. We'll say adding email to shared users. Cool, and then we'll do the same thing for on delete. We'll say equals, and this is going to be the email we want to delete, so we'll say alert. And again, for now, we're just going to use backticks and say removing email from shared users. Okay. So let's just make sure that those work out correctly. We're going to enter in an email here. We'll say hello@gmail.com. Click share. And sure enough, that's getting passed up correctly and calling the right function. And if we delete one of these, we see that that's calling that function with that email. All right, so that's our basic list. Let's just add a little bit of styling here to make it look better. The first thing we're going to do is make it so that the X button and the email address are displayed on a single line here. So to do that, we're just going to open up our shared emails. And for each of our emails, we're going to give this div a class name of, we'll just say something like shared email item. And then if we open up index.css and add that style, I'm going to do that down here. We'll say shared email item. And we're going to want this, first of all, to be display flex. That will make sure that the things are actually displayed in a line here. We'll also say align items center, and that will center everything vertically here. Okay, so we see that that's all displayed nicely. And we're also going to say justify content space between, which should put the maximum amount of space between those two elements and basically display the X over on the right-hand side of this box. So additionally, we're also going to want to probably add a border to the bottom here. So we'll say border bottom, and we'll say 1 pix solid, and we'll do a nice light gray color here, which will add a nice border to the bottom of all of these so that we can tell where one starts, where one ends. Another thing that we're going to do is just add a little bit of padding here. Let me just move border bottom, and then we'll say padding, and we'll do padding of 8 pix. Let's see how that looks. Cool, so that's looking all right so far. The next thing we're going to work on is this form here, and that's going to be pretty straightforward. So let's open up our note sharing settings page again. Oh, our shared emails component, actually. And one other thing that we're going to want to do is clear the input when the user clicks on share, right? We don't want this hello@gmail thing or whatever the user enters there to hang around after they've already clicked on share. So to do that, we're just going to say button, and then after we've called on add with new email, we're going to say set new email to an empty string. Okay, and that should work now. If we click on share, we'll see the modal displayed from our page component, and when we click OK, we'll see that that is now cleared, which is exactly what we wanted. All right, and now to add some styling to this form, essentially what we're going to do is something very similar to what we did with our create note form, or what do we call it? New note form. There we go. And all we're going to do is just use our full width class to make that work. So let's go into shared emails. And to our input, we're just going to say class name equals full width. Oops, let me try and spell that right. And then we'll do the same thing for our button. We're going to say, we're going to go into here and say class name equals full width. Awesome. So let's indent these things a little bit. And we're going to indent that as well. And we're going to want to add space below as a class to this input as well, because we need to leave a little bit of space between that input and the button. So if we go back now, we should see enter a new email to share with. We have this big share button here now that will take care of that. One more thing. Let's actually add some space after this list here so that we don't see that nasty little line resting right on top of our input. So to do that, we're just going to wrap up our emails map thing inside its own div with the class name of space below. We're going to put our emails.map inside of there, and that should take care of it. Cool, and that's looking pretty good if I do say so myself. Now, one last thing that I want to add here is a back button at the top of this page that the user can click on and go back to the note detail page, right? Because there's not really a place to do that right now. If we click on this, it'll take us back to the home page, and we'll have to remember what note we were on, and, you know, it's just not the best user experience. So let's add a back button, and here's what that's going to look like. We're going to go into Note Sharing Settings page, and up here at the top of our page, we're going to have a button with text that says back, and when this button is clicked, we're going to navigate the user back to whatever page they came from. So we're just going to say on click, and we're going to use the use history hook. So we'll say use history from React Router DOM. Down here, we're going to get history by saying const history equals use history. And then when this button is clicked, we're going to say history.push and send them back to the corresponding note detail page. So we'll say /notes/ and then we're going to get the note ID from our URL parameter here. Cool, so that's our back button up here. If we click on that, it will take us back to the note detail page. All right. And actually, what I'm going to do is go into here. I'm going to add a class to our button, and we'll call this class something like inverse button. And basically what that's going to do is just be the button, but only the text, right? The background color will be set to white, and the text will be black or some other color. And that will make it so that it's a button without being this giant, you know, sort of eyesore on our page. So let's go back here. We're going to add an inverse button. And this is something we'll be able to use on all pages if we want to. We're just going to say background color is going to be white, and the color is going to be black. And we're going to add a hover style for this too, so that when a user hovers over this thing, it will actually change color slightly. So in that case, we'll set the background color to a nice light gray. We'll just do EEE. Oops, I wanted to do inverse button hover. There we go. So now whenever we hover over this button, we get that little styling in there, and I think that that looks pretty good. All right, and that's how the back button works, and we have this entire page working at least from a user interface standpoint. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.